This is the Keyboard Chronicles confession. I did not have fear of missing out. I literally was a nerd. I sat in the library and I just listened to different scores.
Hello and welcome to the Keyboard Chronicles, a podcast for keyboard players. I'm your host, David Holloway, and I'm excited as always to be here with you. I'm really pleased to introduce to you Mr. Michael Stephen Brown. It was an absolute pleasure catching up with Michael to talk about his latest album release and his incredible career to date and what is a relatively early juncture for his career. As you'll hear, he's had a stunning period of years, both in education and as a composer and pianist. We do delve quite a bit into his approach to composition, some of the amazing teachers he's had. And I do recommend, if you get a chance, to click on the links in the show notes on our website for a couple of videos that provide beautiful context to his album 12 Blocks. It really does set it up nicely, even if you do it before starting to listen to the show. But anyway, I'll let you jump in and listen to Michael, and I'll talk to you at the end of the show. Michael, it's an absolute honor and pleasure to have you on the show. How are you this fine day?
I'm fine, David. Thank you so much for having me. I'm sitting in Florida in my hotel, and I'm thrilled to be with you. The beauties of the internet.
Absolutely. You must be thrilled getting some warmer weather, given you're a New Yorker. That's a little bit of a temperature increase.
Absolutely.
Yes. So I thought we'd jump in, Michael, just with our fairly standard opener, which is, how's the past 12 months been for you? I know you've obviously finalized an amazing album, and we will talk about that, but just tell us about the past year.
The past year's been busy. I'm a pianist and composer traveling around the world, playing music, writing music, fulfilling commissions, the last deadline, the last minute. I'm releasing this album and lots of new interesting changes that keep happening creatively, personally. And it's actually been a lot this year all at once. You know, when you plan your schedule so far in advance, you don't always know how it's going to be in the moment when things actually are upon you. But this has been sort of a lot all at once, and that's been a little terrifying, but also really thrilling and creatively very fulfilling for me.
Right. You've already prompted me on a question I hadn't thought of, and that is commissions, because obviously that is something that a lot of musicians rely on, particularly in the classical or composition domain. So what is the process broadly, and I know this is a big question, of seeking or gaining commissions? Obviously, reputation is part of it, but what is the process around that?
Well, I would say it depends. Each time it's a little different. It's not like an exact formula, but what's been the way that I've sort of built my career was a pianist and a composer, but they touch each other and they go hand in hand, and I go play places, and I tell people about my pieces I'm writing and the pieces I'd like to write. For example, give you a quick little example. I'm right now in Sarasota, Florida, playing with an organization for a week called La Musica, which is run by the artistic director Wu Han, who also runs the Chamber Music Society of Lincoln Center. So there's a lot of cross-pollination between different chamber music societies and different organizations. And I had this idea about 3 years ago to write my own version of the Carnival of the Animals by Camille Saint-Saëns for the same instrumentation, because I was playing it a lot, and then I thought, well, it's such a fantastic piece. You have to get two pianos, flute, clarinet, strings, percussion together. What else are you going to play with it? I wanted to write my own carnival, but all my animals were going to be endangered, because that's something that was important to me, something I encountered in different places in the world when I travel around. And so I called mine the Carnival of Endangered Wonders. And we're having the world premiere this week in Sarasota. And we have, you mentioned commissioners. An idea like that we have a consortium of 6 commissioners that wanted to come together to present this piece. So I approached each one of them and I said, would you like to join this party? And they said yes. And that's how it worked. And then they programmed the piece.
Amazing. And so, I mean, are there intermittent, I don't know what you would call it, like, are there requests for commissions where there's a competitive process, or it does just tend to be based on organizational approaches and networks?
There have been moments in my life where I've applied and had a more competitive sort of application process for commissions. Now we tend to do that for like awards and residencies as a composer, like Yaddo in upstate New York or McDowell. Those are, or, and whole slew of other, composition residency awards that I'm sure every composer seems to apply for, and mostly just get rejection after rejection. So, that's very much part of what we're doing, is just getting constant rejections. But for commissions, I think those are more sort of people or people you meet, or maybe you want to just write for one performer and a pianist or a bassoon player. A bassoon player needs a piece, or bassoon. I had some wonderful bassoonist who wants to write me a piece for bassoon and double bass. So that's, just because they have a duo. So it's a very much a people to people, a person to person way, at least in my experience,
Yeah.
especially with the smaller chamber music world. It's who do you want to write for? It's kind of like what ties into my album. I wanted to write for very specific people because I admire their artistry and I want their musicianship to be, to shine in the way that I know it can.
No, amazing. And you've mentioned the Lincoln Center there, and I've had the pleasure of attending there once just for a concert. So just tell us about your involvement there, the chamber music sort of program there, just to further set some context of where you sit in
Yeah.
things.
Absolutely. So the Chamber Music Society of Lincoln Center is one of the organizations that presents chamber music in New York, but actually they're the largest chamber music presenter in the world. And they do have a competitive application process for younger musicians to join that I did do as a pianist over 10 years ago. And I came in and I auditioned, but what was cool about that is if you get accepted, they don't start you off with training wheels. They throw you right into the fire and you are playing, real repertoire with professional, veteran musicians, and they don't treat you any differently. So you really get experience by just being thrown right into the what a real professional setting is like right away, a real professional schedule, a rehearsal schedule, travel schedule. So that organization has provided me a lot of opportunities, a lot of chance to play with incredible musicians and play, I would say, a whole slew of chamber music. And furthermore, as I got more involved with them, they presented some more of my own music. But that took some time to cultivate that side of things. They do present new music as well, so that's cool.
So do tell us about your musical upbringing, where you started out. I know you started relatively, well, very young. Just tell us a little bit about those early years into your sort of mid to late teens.
Yeah. So if you want the early stuff, or you want the later
Yeah,
stuff?
please. I
So
both.
I
Yeah.
started. I'll do 30 seconds for your listeners so I don't bore them. But I'm from Long Island, New York. I don't come from a family of musicians. I loved hearing music wherever I did. Raffi, Billy Joel, Mozart. Wanted to be the reincarnation of Mozart when I was 5. I wanted to play the piano. My mom said, "You're too small for the piano. You should play the violin." So I did when I was 4. And then at 5, I said, "I want to switch to the piano." So I did. And I started with an incredible local teacher on Long Island that I feel very grateful for, a man named Herbert Rothgarber, when I was 6, and he started me playing and composing right away. He was also a composer and a pianist, and he encouraged me to look at music from those two angles. If I was playing a short piece by Mozart, he said, "Okay, your homework for next week is to write your own that, mimics what Mozart does harmonically." So actually, I'm very grateful to him because he got me looking at music from these two areas very early on, trying to get me to understand the harmony, the form when I was a kid. And then I got more and more serious, played more and more advanced pieces, blah, blah, blah. Went to Manhattan School pre-college, and then I went to Juilliard when I was in college for piano and composition. I did a double degree. That was really exhausting, really wonderful, and thrilling. I didn't really know that you could do that. I just sort of didn't know what to do, and I applied for both, and I got in for both. And they were like, "Oh, you can do both." I said, "Oh, okay, great." So that
Not many musicians, even those that end up at great schools like Juilliard, tend to start at 6 being taught composition. So what were some of those fundamental concepts that were probably imparted to you at such an early age that still stood you in good stead by the time you got to Juilliard?
you mean when I was 6 and super young, those lessons?
Yeah, and throughout the years after that in the
Yeah.
lead up, yeah.
Yeah, I think the most important thing was structure and phrasing and harmony and how Mozart takes a phrase, let's take an 8 measure phrase, and he modulates from the tonic, from the 1 harmony to the 5 harmony. Maybe there's a slight something else happens, and then the piece goes back home to the tonic harmony. So I think just getting the principle that music goes somewhere, there's tension, there's release, and comes back and doesn't stay static and has structure and phrasing and rhythm. So he introduced me very early on to all these little elements about tension release, melodic shape, gesture, phrasing. And then, of course, by playing lots of examples of little pieces by Mozart, then later by Chopin, when I was always wanting to imitate what I was learning. So if it was Mozart, I wanted to write in that style. If it was Chopin, I wanted to write in the mazurka style, something in 3, something that felt my own thing, but basically was some kind of ripoff of Chopin. At that point, it was not I was not going that. But then I really felt composers like Bartók and Stravinsky when I was 12, 13 really rocked my world. When I heard The Rite of Spring, when I heard the Bartók Concerto for Orchestra and the Bartók string quartets in high school or maybe just before, I felt, okay, this really opens up a whole new language for me. But I could take a little, my classical training, on all that piano music I studied and kind of combine it. And so my music became, sounding like them, like Prokofiev, like Shostakovich, like those composers for a little while. And then I basically just loved consuming music. So I was a really nerdy kid. I did not have friends until I was 19. This is the Keyboard Chronicles confession.
Exactly.
I did not have fear of missing out. I literally was a nerd. I sat in the library and I just listened to different scores and I was like, oh, that's amazing. Oh, that's cool. That's cool. That's cool. So I was just consuming music like at a, pretty high, in pretty high volume, but study very carefully. And I was always interested in learning about music that maybe never it wasn't always just, greatest hits. I always loved kind of like looking into what just somehow slipped through the radar in music history and that could be played again.
Amazing. And so, I mean, moving on from that, I do need to talk about Juilliard. A double degree, as you mentioned, is quite a task to undertake, and it's certainly no mean feat. And so going, in at roughly that 18, 19-year stage, meeting lots of new people, was that sort of the key part where you started to develop your own voice as a musician?
Well, Juilliard was amazing, but what made it amazing for me was the teachers that were there. And I felt like I got very lucky with my piano and composition teacher. My piano teacher is a man named Jerome Lowenthal, who just turned 94.
Yeah.
And he was a man who got me to look very far outside just piano playing. I mean, he's a scholar of French poetry and is always kind of making some kind of esoteric reference, lofty to the music, but always somehow brings it back to help you play a passage of Liszt in a more inspired way. So I felt very grateful to have, and at the end of the day, he's just an incredibly warm and genuine, incredible, supportive person that makes you sort of believe in yourself, which is, I think, the greatest gift a teacher can give a student, in addition to great wisdom and specifics, but giving them the ability to think for themselves and teach themselves. I feel like I got very lucky in both my teachers. My composition teacher as well, Samuel Adler, who just turned 98. Something about
Wow.
these two, they've got incredible longevity in addition to being just incredibly kind, and they have an unbelievable, lifetime of not only their own music, their own works, but of students. They have just taught students from generation after generation. Sam Adler he studied with Copland, and he taught me in my first lesson to really listen to a C major chord, to really listen to it. And he taught me not only what I said about Mr. Lowenthal, about support and feeling and belief in yourself, which are, of course, the most important things, but he taught me a lot about harmony and structure. And we did a lot of exercises together. And he told me a lot of wonderful stories. And he basically looked at my music every week and said, well, this is possible. This is not possible. This could be streamlined like this. I think you should try this like this. Just giving me another way to look at things and have me question things and consider things. It wasn't like you need to do it this way, but you need to consider all options and know at least what you're doing.
So this is your first full album, 12 blocks. I was wondering if you would mind starting off just with a bit of an overview of the album, because it's incredibly diverse. It's around 23 pieces, and there are obviously many different parts to this album. So a bit of an overview for our listeners would probably be a great place to start.
It's my first full album of my own music. However, I've been recording many CDs as a pianist where I would often put a work or two of my own. Usually it would relate conceptually to the theme or maybe have no relation at all. It's something I just wanted to show the world. This album was really a dream. 12 blocks, it's called. I'll get into the title in a second. It's been a long process because these pieces were written over a 7-year span. And I started thinking of ways that I could release an album conceptually, thematically, put all, a certain body of my compositional work together. These pieces are smaller chamber ensemble works written specifically for people in my life. My teacher, Jerome Lowenthal, and his partner, Ursula Oppens, as one, and I'll go into each one if you'd like. But people that have been very much influential in my life, ex-girlfriends, current relationships, it's all there. And I thought it would have a nice variety to have a lot of piano-focused things that I play most of it, but also to have clarinet violin piece and lots of things related to relationships. I would say the main theme of this is human relationships, whether they're romantic or friendships or past loves. It's all there. And there's 2 song cycles as well. So it's come from, all different parts of life at different times, people that stop you in your tracks and make you think about yourself. You didn't anticipate meeting them, but when you did, you realized they kind of show you something about yourself you didn't understand. So that definitely happens to me, probably happens to everyone. And so it's relatable and they inspire you and your art, your creativity evolves by meeting people. So that's what this album is about. It's about sharing an evolution about how people can really teach you about yourself and help you unlock creative avenues you didn't have before.
Oh, wonderful. And let's start with the title track, 12 blocks. So I'm aware of the history of this track to some extent, but it's a lovely story. Just tell us about the story behind the title track and then the 2 people that you've already mentioned and their approach to playing on it.
It was pandemic times, and my teacher, former teacher, Jerome Lowenthal, I spoke about from Juilliard, was walking 12 blocks every day to see his life partner, Ursula Oppens, a new music pianistic legend in New York City. And they would spend time together, and he would mumble French poetry to himself and other poetry that he loved on his 12-block journey. And because it was the pandemic, they were looking for creative opportunities and new pieces to play in their pod of 2 that were not just isolated solo pieces, and they were looking for a challenge, and they commissioned me to write a piece. And I thought about the story, about how Jerry visits Ursula every day and walks this 12-block journey. I know those 12 blocks in Manhattan. It's if your listeners around the world familiar with Manhattan's Upper West Side, from 103rd Street on West End Avenue to 115th Street and Broadway, you pass some really beautiful things. You pass Riverside Park. You pass a street at 108th Street called Duke Ellington Way. I mean, it's a very creative, it's a very musical part of town. It's also architecturally stunning. A lot of those buildings are quite old and beautiful. So, and it's a little more peaceful than some of the other manic parts of Manhattan. Maybe there's the occasional bird and occasional nature, not too much, but that really inspired me. And it was so thrilling that they wanted this piece and fun. And I put spoken poetry throughout. They switch places in the piece as well. And they've played it several times live in concert and all over the world, actually. They brought it to Italy. They brought it to China. They play it all the time together. So I'm very grateful to them. And then I said, we got to get you in the studio. You got to record it. We have to do it. And they finally did it. And it was a thrilling day. So that is the title of the album, 12 Blocks, which relates to that track, which is set in the middle of the album. It's about a 10-minute piano piece for piano, four hands, and spoken poetry, and they both take turns speaking poetry.
And so I do need to ask, what are the challenges as a composer, Michael, of composing for four hands a piano piece? So I'm assuming this may not have necessarily been the first time you've done it, but what were the challenges of doing a piece like that, particularly with the integration of the spoken word aspect?
Well, one piano, four hands poses many challenges, whether you're writing for it or playing it. If you just play it, the composer has their primo, the top part, and their secondo, the bottom part, and you have 20 fingers and 4 elbows to choreograph, and you're sharing a space in which you're very used to being all alone in with someone else. But sometimes you're even sharing a bench if you don't have two piano benches. So a lot of it is choreography. A lot of it is understanding what the hands can do, where they can be, where they can't be. And a lot of it has to be figured out in real time with the people. So Jerry and Ursula would say to me, "Oh, Michael, that's not really possible." Actually, to be honest, they made everything I wanted possible. A lot of times performers, myself included as a performer, will tell a composer, "Oh, this is a little awkward, this is a little difficult." But they were pretty much like, "How do we figure this out?" So there are moments, and if you watch the YouTube video of this piece, which shows the camera from above, you can see there are moments where, Jerry has to lift his right hand, or they're always playing a little, very subtle pianistic choreographic dance with the hands and the elbows. And it's not always successful because they're often crashing into each other. But it's in my mind when I'm composing, but you don't really know how it's going to be until you actually get two people at the piano to try it out. Because that's the way to know if it works or if it doesn't work, or if it works well enough to sort of figure it out. But it's the same with Brahms. I'm here in Florida playing Hungarian dances with Wuhan of Brahms today. And we rehearsed last night, and we're like, "Oh my God, you need to put your elbow down. Put your elbow up. Get out of my way. Use a different finger there so I don't crash on your pinky finger and really hurt you." So all this stuff is kind of fun, actually. I really enjoy four hands because the piano, as we said before, it sometimes can be isolating to lock yourself in a room and just practice for hours a day. And if you can do some chamber music with another pianist, it's great.
Brilliant. And we'll definitely be linking to that amazing video you've mentioned. I've
Thank
watched it half a dozen times, and it's
Oh,
it's such an amazing video. I'm going to jump a little bit all over the album, Michael. So
please.
break up Etude for the right hand alone. So obviously there was a reason this is for the right hand alone. Tell us a little bit about that and what, again, challenges it posed for you as a composer when you've only playing with one hand. I suppose the opposite of what we've just talked about.
Yeah, well, the album is autobiographical, and there was a pandemic time, and I went through a breakup in my life and romantic relationship, and I also had a little accident where I couldn't play with my pinky finger on the left hand for 3 months. So here, all my concerts were canceled. I had plenty of time at home to learn music, and suddenly I had this unfortunate thing happen where I couldn't play, and I wanted to play, of course, because it was really fueling me and keeping me creatively going. And then I thought, well, I have a right hand and I'm a composer, so why don't I write a piece for a really difficult piece I can practice for one hand, for right hand, and why don't I pour my aching soul in a masochistically difficult piano piece for right hand? And I called it Breakup Etude for the right hand alone, and it's dedicated to myself. And when I was looking for pieces to play for right hand alone, I realized in music history there was only a handful of them. Most of the one-handed piano pieces are written for the left hand alone. And actually, I learned a few of them with the right hand. Like the Scriabin Nocturne for left hand alone, you can play with the right hand, and I did. But at that time, I was like, I'll write myself a difficult piece, and I did, and I regret that now because it's so hard, but I keep playing it, and it became a kind of painful expression of feeling at the time, and now over time, it's become kind of funny to me, like kind of a comic piece. So that's Breakup Etude for the right hand alone. It is difficult. It's kind of isn't nearly impossible to do some of the things I asked for. Some of the jumps just for the right hand alone would be so much easier with two hands. But I think that's sort of written into the piece. It's sort of there's a kind of, choreographic feat, a kind of pianistic impossibility in the piece that is written in, and I wanted to keep for kind of theatrical reasons.
Love it. And another core component of the album, Michael, is the Four Lakes for Children suite, I'll call it, because I'm not great at the terminology, but Four Lakes for Children. So again, this is based, you've already mentioned Yaddo once. Again, tell us about that amazing place and the inspiration for these pieces.
Yaddo is really an amazing place. It's an artist retreat, a residency in Saratoga Springs, New York, which is in upstate New York. It's a very beautiful spot. It's one of these places where you do apply and with a project. And I applied with my Carnival of Endangered Wonders project, actually, and they accepted me. And I got there and I wrote a different piece, which happens all the time because I was so inspired by the story of the place. It was founded around 1900 by the Trask family. They were wealthy industrialists that had 4 children, and they loved having people come to this property and create art, authors, writers, visual artists. It was very, it's very, very peaceful. And they had 4 children, each who died before the age of 10. Very tragically. And I was really moved by that story because there are 4 lakes on the property named after these kids that died in childhood. Some at the age of 2 months, some Christina lived until about 10. And the lakes are very beautiful. And I was there in the summer, so I walked around these lakes and I listened to the different sounds and I tried to imagine these kids' personalities, had they, what they were like and had they grown up. And I felt very compelled to write these 4 miniature piano pieces, 4 children to play. The idea was that they could be played by young children. Each one explores a different technique. As that unfolded, they turned out to be a little more difficult than I thought. So maybe the piece could be called Four Lakes for Talented Children instead. But it's really kind of a time piece about my peaceful time at Yaddo of experiencing this other world and imagining what their life was like. And yeah, so that was a piece I played it a lot. And it's a piece that adults, intermediate pianists can play and have played, which I'm grateful for. So yeah, that was my Yaddo experience. And it's where I met my fiancée, Angeline Gregasson, who's a filmmaker, and we collaborated on a film called Lake Allen, which is on YouTube, which has the soundtrack is the first piece where I dress up in 1890s clothes and imagine that we're back in time during this world. So if you want, you can check that out too.
Yes, we'll definitely be linking that. It looks amazing. Initially, I honestly thought it was original footage from that era.
Wow.
No, seriously.
Okay.
Yeah. So no, really, really good. We'll be linking to that.
That's so cool. That's really, really nice. Thanks, David.
No problems. Another aspect of the album is you wrote for the Spa Trio, and you handed over the piano duties to Anne-Marie McDermott. So from a compositional viewpoint, when you aren't playing the piano part, do you find yourself writing more demanding or entirely different even pieces, or do you actually go easy on your subject if you know it may not be you playing it, sorry?
That's a great question. I don't think I go easy on anyone. I mean, the 12 blocks for Jerry and Ursula is insanely hard, and they complained about it many times, but they were real troopers. And the piece Pas de Trois, written for the Spa Trio, which is comprised of 3 friends and colleagues, Susanna Phillips, soprano, who's an old friend, and Paul Neubauer, who's an incredible violist, and Anne-Marie McDermott on piano. They came to me because they have this trio of soprano, viola, and piano, which is a slightly unusual combination of instruments that has works by Brahms and other pieces, but not that many. So they've been commissioning composers to write for them, and I was lucky they asked me. And I basically tried to find 3 poems that could fit their personalities. And it's in 3 movements, the work. And the first poem is by D.H. Lawrence called Piano. The second poem, I was really looking for a viola poem that talked about an arrogant violist who wanted the spotlight, because Paul Neubauer, one of my dear friends, always loves the spotlight as the viola. He's always playing the inner voices in these string quintets and piano quintets. And I wanted to give him a movement and a poem that he could really kind of go really far and shine. So I wrote my own called The Violist, about an arrogant violist who will not share the spotlight. And Paul handles it brilliantly. And there's Susanna narrates during that movement. So she narrates, and there's these little interjections with viola piano, and then there are some sung moments as well. And that's kind of the comic relief intermezzo of the three songs. And then the final song is called Soprano, and the poem is by Rita Dove. It's a very beautiful, inspired, simple poem based about Susanna's kind of transcendent voice type, and kind of brings the cycle or three poems together. It kind of brings the three songs together with a tranquil close.
Great. Is it true that you still frequently compose with pencil and paper rather than notation software? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, which is great. So does that sort of what I'll call analog pacing affect your relationship with the piano when you sit down and compose? It makes it probably helps in some ways. Like what are the advantages of that approach to this day?
Yeah. So I don't have a full system like I'm only writing with pencil and paper. I'm never using the computer. I think going to these artist residencies like Yaddo and then 6 months later McDowell, it brought me into a place where I could feel history. I could feel the past. I could feel the space. I could listen to the birds. And I felt somehow using technology in these places felt, not in line with the spirit of nature. And I like being at the piano where if I have an idea, I can just take my pencil and my paper and just scribble something. And that's often when I least expect it. I get my ideas that actually, grow into something. So I like to go with pencil and paper as far as I can until I feel like, okay, it's not legible. If I have to give this to someone, it needs to be put on the computer. But for example, when I was writing this Carnival of Endangered Wonders, I wanted to work on it with pencil and paper because I didn't want any limitations of what I could do and could not do. And sometimes the computer forces you to do something a certain way just to make it, look a certain way. And that can have its advantages, but I wanted no limitations, at least during the process. So I wrote the piece out by pencil and paper and I sent it and I hired someone to put it on the computer. And I said, you figure it out, because I wanted to spend the time writing the piece and being incredibly in the creative process rather than spending all the time Googling or using AI to see how can I do this? Because that in this particular piece took me out of the creative process. So I would say I do a little bit of both, but I've been enjoying the freedom of the pencil lately.
That's great. And I mean, you don't need me to tell you that another core part of any composition is the idiosyncrasies of the instrument you're composing on. So I'm particularly fascinated to hear about Octavia. Tell us about the story of that piano and the role it plays in your musical life.
Yeah, well, I've been lucky to have some beautiful pianos in my life, and this piano I found on Craigslist. I was looking to upgrade from my childhood model Steinway to something better, and I found this very cheap 9-foot piano on Craigslist. And I showed it to my piano tuner, one of my best friends, Tali Mahanner, and she said, we need to go look at that piano immediately, because it's an 1893. It's a rare vintage time. It was a very special time for Steinways. And we went upstate New York. It was basically not playable. It hadn't been maintained. She said, you should buy this piano and we'll rebuild it and we'll redo it. So I did. And it got completely it was like a complete gut reno job I named the piano Octavia. And because I liked the double play on the idea of the octave, and also from Roman times, Octavia was known for her nobility and her loyalty. And I thought those were wonderful words to describe a piano. But Octavia is female, so I refer to her as she. So she has an unbelievable golden sound, but she has a lot of power. She has teeth. She's now kind of going through her teenage years with me, because we've been together over 10 years. So she's getting a little sassy with me. But no, the pianos she's amazing. It's been a real thrill to play music on her, to record music on her. One of the tracks from the album, actually, the final track, Poor Angeline, who's my fiance, was recorded on Octavia. So you can hear the piano on the album 12 Blocks.
Mate, yes. Now, this is a little bit of a left to center question, Michael, but you're a vocal advocate for mental health support in the performing arts. Tell us a little bit about what the genesis was for that. It is an incredibly important issue for all of the performing arts and wider society more generally. What sort of inflamed that passion for you?
Well, for me, therapy has been incredibly important in my life and also just friendship. I mean, the amount of support one needs to be in the creative field it never stops. It's endless. It's an incredibly vulnerable path. You have no job security. You keep needing to reinvent yourself and coming out with projects. I actually met this couple at a concert, several years ago. It came to me and they said they were starting this mental health organization called Creatives Care, and would I play a benefit concert for them? And I said yes. And they explained their mission, which was to raise money to help find musicians and dancers, not just musicians, but creative types in their mid 20s, let's say, just coming out of school, finding their way, help them. They're not often in a financially strong position, help them find access to better mental health care than they could get from, if they're even lucky, their free insurance policies. It's a big health insurance in this country, in the United States, is a big issue. So I thought this was a great cause. They were just starting out. I met a lot of interesting people, not just musicians, but dancers and choreographers and actors. And it was a kind of exciting community that they put together all these different benefit concerts. And I think they've been doing very well from what I can tell in
Right.
raising money and connecting young creative types to different mental health experts. And I'm very happy to support them in any way that I can. I've played several concerts for them and just spread the word. And I think they've been doing great things. So I think it's very
Great.
important. I hope they keep going. I know it's a lot of work, but they're doing great.
Yeah, no, amazing. And just while we're on the subject of performance, I mean, what's your approach, Michael, to preparing for performances? So obviously if you've got a series of performances and you know your repertoire broadly, so I'm interested in just sort of maintaining the stamina night by night, but also when you're preparing for a whole new show or at the start of a series of performances, what is your rehearsal process?
Well, that's the big thing, is always planning your energy, planning your schedule, planning your repertoire as a pianist and as a composer. I mean, is a lot to planning comes into, it's like basically is everything. So when I think, oh, I have nothing to do that week, it's not true. You have everything to do because you have to prepare for the next week or the week 3 weeks from now. So I look and I see what are the most difficult pieces I have to play, what needs attention, what have I played a million times that I can kind of put on the back burner and still be okay. And then when you show up to a place, whether I'm playing with an orchestra or playing chamber music like I am this week, we have a full morning till night rehearsal schedule. I'm about to do about 8 hours of rehearsal when we get off the phone. So we'll rehearse several different pieces, and we have a concert in a few days. In a couple days, we'll start rehearsing my new piece, and that should be interesting because not only will we try to put it together, but I'm sure I'll get a lot of feedback from the musicians, which I'm excited about, to see what works and what needs reshaping or redoing or revising. So I would say, one of the things that I love about being a pianist, composer, pianist, is that every week is a little bit different. It throws you some new challenges, some new obstacles. You can be in a new place, but the principles remain the same. The rehearsal, the individual practice, the planning ahead, the work ethic, that stuff really kind of has continuity. The other stuff, you have to be prepared to be, for anything to happen. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And so looking further ahead, I mean, you're relatively early in your career, Michael. What's coming up next for you that you're happy to disclose? I mean, even your own solo works, have you got other stuff that brewing there creatively? What sort of
Yeah.
tell us a bit? Yeah.
Yeah, I've recorded as a pianist the 13 Nocturnes of Gabriel Fauré that I hope will be out next year. I recorded on Octavia. I've recorded an album of Mendelssohn, which I'm editing as
Wow.
well, that I hope will come out soon. And I have another album that'll be of my own piano concerto that will come out in about a year that's already recorded. So these things just take time, I have albums, I've got commissions, and I'm hoping to keep, learning wonderful repertoire, putting together creative programs. I have a program for Beethoven's 200th anniversary of his death where I've commissioned two composers and myself to write works inspired by Beethoven. And I'm always looking for creative collaborations. And Angeline, my filmmaker partner, and I'm writing the film score for 3 of her films. That's another long process, but I feel like I'm doing a lot, and And that's exactly how I want it to be.
Absolutely. And just very briefly, composing for film is obviously a different beast generally. What sort of skills does that challenge you with versus the other aspects of your career?
Well, you have a lot less freedom when you have to line up the music to the visuals, unless you can get the director to line up the visuals to the music, which doesn't happen as often. But when you work with a friend who's a director, maybe you have a little more leeway with that. But no, it's a totally different thing. But the same principles of music, harmony and shape and gesture, in my opinion, apply. And I've been really enjoying. This is relatively new for me, film scoring. So I'm learning and I'm enjoying it, and I look forward to seeing where it goes.
Yeah, great. And so the last couple of questions, I'm not sure this has ever happened for you, Michael, but is something ever gone spectacularly wrong for you in a performance that you can look back upon and laugh now?
Has something ever gone spectacularly wrong for me in a performance? That's a great question. Yes, the answer is definitely yes. Yes, I mean, the let's see, what's gone spectacularly wrong? Well, I guess we have to define spectacularly wrong. But I would say, well, the most boring top of mind answer I could think of is, you know, when I play chamber music, I use an iPad. And every once in a while, there's some malfunction. I still think it's actually better than human page turners,
Yeah.
but there is. I was once playing for a trio with two friends in New Orleans, a trio concert, piano, violin, cello. And we're in the 4A trio, which is one of his last pieces. And it's just pages of chromatic writing, and it's a very confusing piece. And my iPad just jumped ahead like 60 pages, one by one by one by one, and I couldn't control it at all. And I played the entire, let's say, development or middle part of the first movement, kind of from memory, kind of with one hand, trying to tap the pages to get back. And we didn't stop. We never stopped. I kind of chromatically found my way, and then I don't think, I mean, they kind of knew, my violinist and cellist, that, but I kind of kept going. Another one, I'll just tell you, happened a few weeks ago. I played Chicago with another trio with Pinka Zuckerman and his wife, Amanda Forsyth. I'm giving you two answers for the price of one. You can
Please.
cut one out. And we played in Chicago Saturday night. I had to get back and play a Chamber Music Society family education concert at 4 p.m. So I had to fly the day of the concert from Chicago to New York, which is a very common flight in the United States. You would think it works. It was a nice day. We took off in Chicago. We try to land in New York. Fog comes in. We're about to go on the runway. They start ascending, and they say, "Oh, we need to land in Syracuse." And I was
Wow.
like, "That's really far from New York, by the way. That's a 5-hour drive." And I'm like, "Why don't they divert somewhere 20 minutes away where you could take a cab?" But no, they go somewhere really far away. This is just top of mind. This just happened. We land in Syracuse. I then, kind of freaking out about the family concert, thinking I'm not going to make it. But the plane took off at the last minute, and I showed up at 3:58 for a 4 o'clock
Wow.
family concert that I had to host. I put on my clothes, I had a sip of water, and I hosted the family concert. It all worked out. But those things do happen, and especially, travel right now has been pretty unstable. In the wintertime, especially, everything's getting messed up. So
That's
plan
amazing.
ahead. All your listeners, plan your travel. Give yourself some extra time.
Exactly. That's amazing. Thank you for both those. And
Yeah.
then our final question before we do let you go for 8 hours of rehearsal, and that's the Desert Island Disc question. So, 5 albums that have had a big impact on your life.
5 albums that are big. Okay. Well, I love listening to LPs. And one LP I have is a compilation of great pianists of the past, from 1915 to 1940 or so. Lots of great pianists: William Capell, Joseph Levine, Joseph Hoffman. So I love that. Would be one of them. That is incredible. When I was a kid, I listened over and over and again to The Rite of Spring, with Leonard Bernstein and the New York Philharmonic. That would be Desert Island. 5. You're making me choose 5. Boy. Well, off the top of my head, I would have to throw in some kind of jazz into
Yep.
that mix, because I can't play jazz, but I love listening to jazz. I'd probably choose Art Tatum, one of his albums,
Nice.
live. just completely inspired. His variations on T for two, something like that really inspires me over time. Shooting it's a lot of piano heavy things.
That's okay.
Um, I'd probably take a Glenn Gould album to the desert island because I think Glenn Gould, maybe his later Goldberg variations, because I think that I never tire of listening
Yeah.
to. It's just so deep. It's just all pianists and Bach, but that's okay. Final one, did I mention? Yeah, let's see. Rite of Spring, jazz, great pianist of the past,
Is
Goldberg
it true
variation.
you're a Ravel fan?
I'm a huge Ravel fan. Huge Ravel fan. That's another one. Okay. What would I take of Ravel? Yeah, it would probably be a recording of his Rhapsody Espagnole or his Bolero, something like that would be amazing. Yeah, or
Great.
Michelangelo playing Gaspard de la Nuit, one of those Ravel albums I would take with me.
No, great picks. And as much as I said that was the last question, you've just prompted me on something. And I
Go
do
ahead.
understand fundamentally what you mean when you say this, but I'd love you to sort of expand on it. When you say you can't play jazz, from your perspective, what do you mean by that?
Meaning, it's like the notes are the same. The piano is the same. But it's like, English versus French.
Yeah,
It's a completely different language of harmony, of improvisation, of understanding the chordal structures. I mean, I can fool around for myself, but I wouldn't let anyone hear it.
yeah,
I like improvising for myself, but I wouldn't and also the understanding of from memory, knowing all these standard tunes and then being able to improvise on them. It just blows me away when I
yeah.
listen to jazz musicians play or work. So I find total admiration. I'm not worthy, but it's also something I've never really studied or delved that deep into. I kind of just admire it and love it.
Yeah. No, great answer. Look, Mike, I do need to let you go, but I cannot thank you enough for your time. 12 Blocks is such a stunning album, and I cannot wait to see what comes next. And it's been a real privilege to speak with you the past 45 minutes.
Well, thank you, David. Thank you for having me. It's been an honor to be on your show, and thanks so much for your thoughtful questions and for having me. It was so much fun.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that interview with Michael. I know I did. Like a lot of us out there that perhaps do not do music full time, I certainly have a bit of imposter syndrome when speaking to someone with that level of musical capability. But Michael's also one of those people that shows just how that knowledge can be imparted to others and sort of enrich all of us as players. So I can't thank him enough for his time. I hope you did enjoy it because, as I said, I know I did. I learned a lot. Big shout out to our supporters. And just before I do that, we do really appreciate those of you that have joined either as YouTube members on Patreon or our Substack. Just a quick heads up for those still listening that we've essentially rationalized all three of those channels, so to speak, into one offering where they're essentially priced the same. We try and keep it within cents of each other to make it fair. It's just some of the pricing tiers are a little bit different, but basically they're the same, where we're trying to give people options on platforms that they love to help keep us afloat at the same time. So do check out the links in the show notes, but we are now offering early access to snippets of interviews, transcripts, you name it, behind the scenes, ability to ask questions, heads up on future guests. They are all essentially offered on YouTube membership. So if you are watching this on a video, just look below the video and you'll see there's a join button. We would love you to do that. Otherwise on Substack or Patreon. So it's patreon.com/Keyboard Chronicles. And on Substack, if you search for the Keyboard Chronicles, we will show up. We're just about to release another transcript from our interview with Kerry Minier from Gentle Giant, a sort of a curated transcript of that. So, but again, available to everyone. So those supporters that we hugely appreciate right now is Mr. Paul Heaton from the sunny land of Australia. So Paul is a great guy and he runs an amazing YouTube channel called Dreamscapist, and he's produced a lot of really great ambient music for a whole range of purposes. I mean, obviously for music appreciation primarily. So do check out Dreamscapist on YouTube. Very highly recommended. The lovely Tammy Catcher from Tammy's Musical Stew. Thank you as always, Tammy, for your ongoing support. We do appreciate it. And the brilliant Dewey Evans from Wales, as always, appreciate your support, sir. Dave Bryce and the team at the musicplayer.com forums and the Keyboard Corner in particular. Thank you, guys. And last but not least, Mike Wilcox from Midnight Mastering, who does a supreme job of turning each of our creations into something much better than what they were, at least in my case, when I've created them. So yeah, look, and a thank you again for listening. We really appreciate it. We hope you've enjoyed the episodes over the recent weeks, and we've got lots more coming. Believe me, there's lots coming down the pipeline. So until then, keep on playing.